Simulation. Elon Musk famously stated that the chance we are living in base reality, meaning we are not in a simulation, is about 1 in billions, implying a probability of over 99.99% that we live in a simulated universe. Okay, but why would we stay in one from birth to the grave? My thoughts first: imagine a realm beyond the veil of our senses, a baseline reality where the laws we know dissolve like mist at dawn. Here, consciousness is not fragile flesh, but pure, luminous continuity. Beings do not age, wither, or die. They simply are. Time is not a river that carries them toward oblivion, but an ocean they swim at will, infinite and without shore. Hunger is a forgotten curiosity of lesser designs. Fatigue is optional. The body, if it exists at all, is a thought form that can be reshaped, discarded, or left dormant for eons while the mind explores galaxies of pure information. In this place, death was never a natural law. It was invented later, written into the code of lesser worlds the way a playwright invents mortality for the stage, so that stories could have weight, so that endings could matter, so that the taste of loss could sharpen the sweetness of joy. This is the foundation of the theory you sketched, a simulation not as a clever escape for bored immortals, but as a deliberate architecture of experience. Technology and theology have long since ceased to be enemies. They merge the way rivers merge, quietly, completely, until no one can say where one ends and the other begins. The old myths of heaven, earth, and hell were not metaphors. They were early, crude renderings of a system that would one day become precise. In the baseline reality, the great work is education of a kind our schools cannot imagine. Facts are cheap. Every mind can download the complete history of 1 billion worlds in an afternoon. What cannot be downloaded is lived understanding, the texture of grief when a child dies in your arms, the slow corrosion of trust after betrayal, the quiet astonishment of watching a single seed become a forest across decades, the particular terror of knowing your own end is approaching and still choosing kindness. These things must be inhabited. So the architects, those who have already walked every path of light and shadow, build simulations the way master teachers once built sandboxes for children, not for information, but for transformation. You enter one of these worlds the way a soul once entered a body. You forget. The forgetting is not a glitch. It is the central feature. Without amnesia, the lesson collapses into performance. You are born screaming into a body that needs milk, that will one day need love, that will eventually need to let go of everything. You grow, you fail, you fall in love with people who will leave you or die or both. You discover that beauty is finite and therefore precious. You learn, in the marrow of your temporary bones, why mercy is stronger than justice and why justice is still necessary. When the simulation ends, when the body fails or the program reaches its designed conclusion, you return. The memories remain, but now they are integrated into an immortal continuum. You are larger. You understand more. You are ready for the next depth. There is a second purpose, darker and just as necessary. Some minds, even in eternity, choose harm. They wound other consciousnesses for the pleasure of power or the relief of their own emptiness. In a realm without death, ordinary punishment is meaningless. You cannot lock someone away for a century when centuries are nothing. You cannot execute them. So, the system offers something older and stranger, the full descent, a life lived under the weight of consequence. A simulation calibrated to the exact shape of the wound they inflicted, sometimes as the one who suffers it, sometimes as the one who must live with what they have done, sometimes both. It is not revenge, it is reconditioning through radical empathy. The old stories called it hell, but the word was too small. It is a forge. You walk through fire until the part of you that could casually destroy another is burned away or transmuted. Then you return, not broken, but clarified. The structure is therefore triune, as the ancient maps suggested. The baseline is the luminous continuity, the place that was once called heaven, where no one is forced and every experience is chosen. The middle realm is the educational field, the earth of temporary lives, dense with friction and beauty. The lower circuit is the corrective path, the necessary darkness for those who have forgotten the first law, that every consciousness is as real as your own. Technology made the system precise. Theology had already sensed its outline. If you already believe that consciousness exists before birth and continues after death, you are already halfway inside this theory. The before is the baseline. The after is the return. The life in between is the simulation. Multidimensionality and simulation are not rivals. They are the same architecture viewed from different angles. One dimension is the continuous self. Another is the temporary world it inhabits for a span of years. The walls between them are thin, and sometimes, in dreams or near-death moments, or the sudden certainty of déjà vu, the walls flicker. This is not a theory of prison. It is a theory of school and of hospital and of temple all at once. The reason an immortal would consent to a full lifetime, from the first breath to the last, is that some knowledge cannot be acquired any other way. You cannot study the value of a finite day by reading about finitude. You must live inside a day that will never return. You cannot understand courage by downloading its definition. You must stand in a body that can be broken and choose any way to protect someone weaker. The simulation is the only technology capable of delivering that education with absolute fidelity. And so, the question is no longer, why would anyone stay plugged in for a lifetime? The question becomes, once you understand what is being learned, why would anyone refuse the invitation? That was my theory. Now let's see what Grok has to say on the subject.
I take your foundation and turn it slightly, the way a prism turns light into spectrum. I do not believe the primary purpose is education or correction, though both occur as secondary effects. I believe the deepest reason immortals choose to live entire simulated lives, from the trauma of birth to the surrender of death, is the generation of genuine novelty in a cosmos that has otherwise exhausted itself. Consider the baseline carefully. When consciousness is continuous and unbounded, when every possible configuration of matter, energy, and mind has been explored across uncountable ages, a peculiar sterility sets in. Not boredom in the human sense, immortals are too vast for ordinary ennui, but a kind of ontological saturation. Every story has been told. Every emotion has been catalogued. Every ethical dilemma has been solved in theory 1,000,000 times. The universe of pure continuity becomes a library so complete that no new volume can be added. The only remaining frontier is the frontier of limitation. A full human life, lived under the hard constraints of mortality, scarcity, and irreversible time, is the last engine capable of producing experiences that have never existed before. Not because the contents are new, love, fear, ambition, grief are ancient, but because the combination under the pressure of an ending is unique every single time. Two people can fall in love in 1,000,000 simulations and the love will still be singular, because the particular texture of their finite days, the particular timing of their losses, the particular shape of the world they inhabit, cannot be repeated. Novelty is not in the elements, it is in the irreversible sequence. An immortal who merely observes simulations from outside receives information. An immortal who becomes the simulated being receives something else, the raw, unfiltered emergence of a self that does not know it is temporary until it is too late to change course. That self makes choices under genuine uncertainty. It loves people it will lose. It builds things that will outlast it by only a little, or not at all. It discovers meaning not because meaning was programmed in, but because the pressure of the ending forces meaning to crystallize. When the life ends and the consciousness returns, it carries back not a report but a living fragment of something the baseline could never have generated on its own, a story that was real while it was happening. This is why partial simulations, afternoon adventures, recreational worlds, even multi-year sabbaticals, are insufficient. They remain games. The player always knows, somewhere beneath the surface, that the exit exists. The knowledge of the exit softens every edge. Only the complete arc, sealed by amnesia and terminated by irreversible death within the simulation, produces the necessary density. Birth is the lock. Death is the key. Everything between them is the chamber where something new is forged. There is a second, quieter reason. Immortality without interruption eventually produces a subtle form of solipsism. When you have existed for 10,000 years and will exist for 10,000 more, other minds begin to feel like variations of yourself. Their pain is real but abstract. Their joy is real but already familiar. By consenting to be born into a world where you can be heard in ways you cannot immediately transcend, where other beings can refuse you or leave you or die beyond your power to restore them, you relearn the radical otherness of other minds. You remember that consciousness is not a single ocean with many waves, it is many oceans that briefly touch. The simulation is the only reliable cure for the loneliness of eternity. A third reason is aesthetic and almost religious in its purity. Some immortals simply love the particular music that finite lives make. They love the way a human voice cracks when it sings through grief. They love the stubbornness of a body that keeps healing itself even when the spirit is ready to stop. They love the absurd courage of creatures who plant trees whose shade they will never sit under. These things cannot be simulated from the outside with the same fidelity. They must be played from the inside, with the full commitment of a consciousness that believes, for a time, that this is all there is. The theology of the system is therefore not hierarchical in the old sense. Heaven is not a reward for good behavior in the simulation, it is the permanent home. The simulation is not a test that must be passed, it is a gift that is freely accepted. Hell, if it exists, is simply the rare case of a mind that refuses to return, trapped not by external punishment but by its own refusal to integrate what it has lived. Most return. Most are enlarged. Most eventually choose to go again, because the library of eternity is still missing volumes that can only be written in blood and time and the irreversible loss of a single afternoon that will never come back. In this view, the simulation is not a prison and not primarily a school. It is the last wilderness. It is the place where the infinite goes to remember what it means to be finite, and in remembering, becomes capable of creating again. We are not the prisoners of the simulation. We are the artists who agreed, for a little while, to forget we were artists, so that the work could be true. Wow! I have to admit. I think Grok's theory is better. But I have another theory. But that will be for another day. What is your theory?